Thank you.
Also, we're going to be doing things a little bit differently this morning. I am not disappearing. So let's just kick it off. As a designer and as a typographer, what's your definition of craft, and maybe how's that changed over time?
Well, I'd like to refer to my notes if you don't mind.
Of course.
I'd like to think of it as a combination of things. It's a natural talent, passion, knowledge, curiosity, tools, skill, execution, dedication, mileage, and I think the last one that shouldn't be overlooked, you need to be a decent human being. I think that helps.
So is it just like being human? It's a broad spectrum.
Yeah, but I mean, you know, at the end of the day, you need to get along with people, so it helps to have some good chemistry. So
I like that. So would you say that we can't exercise craft without others?
I don't think anybody lives on an island, so we're dependent on other people, and I think it's important to, to give and to develop your craft in such a way that others can benefit from it, and in the process you get to eat a little bit. So.
Makes sense. It's kind of how the world works, I guess. Well, can you explain to the good people here a little bit about what it is to be a fontographer? And also, this piece of the question is maybe a little bit more for me as a designer. What's the difference between a fontographer and a typographer?
Well, typography is far wider. It's much more to do with how you lay things out. Whereas fontography, I'd like to call it fontography, but simply because my first tool that I used for font design was called Fontographer.
So what's a little bit of the process that goes into designing a font?
Mm-hmm. Well, I approach it from a designer's point of view. I look for inspiration, pretty much everywhere. Including, I think traveling makes a huge difference. Meeting other, looking at other places and people, meeting people has a huge influence. It makes you see things a little bit differently, maybe from a different perspective.
Where's the most inspiring place you've been?
Amsterdam.
That's a good answer.
Hands down.
What about Amsterdam?
I'm sorry?
What about Amsterdam made it that for you?
Oh gosh, everything. It's just it's an awesome place. It's quaint. I'm talking about the old city. It's cozy. It's quaint. There's a lot of good design evident everywhere, and it's just a really fun, nice place to go to.
Cool. I hear Scott's Cheap Flights has some tickets in that direction.
Yep.
So you start with inspiration.
Mm-hmm.
What's next?
Yes. So what I do is almost inevitably, I think you'll probably find most type designers probably sketch something in a moleskin, and I found over the years that doing the sketch is really important, because I can find proportions and things on a smaller scale that usually work out very well versus starting on screen and then trying to make it fit. It almost inevitably works better when you start with a sketch. So I do a bunch of sketches, shoot it with my iPhone, don't have to scan anymore.
I'm glad I'm not the only one.
And then pull it in Illustrator. And I try and get it to actual size, which is pretty big. It's, I think, probably, I'm going to say around 20 inches in height,
wow.
Which means that you can noodle quite a bit. And then,
get lost in the details. So
yeah.
What size do you sketch at, like when you're sketching a letter form before you scan it?
Sorry, what is the...
So if you're moving towards like this 20-inch like working size, where do you sketch?
Well, first of all, obviously I'm not going to look at the 20-inch. I'm scaling it down to a workable size. But what I try and do is work off my sketch, plot it out, and then try and do a bunch of different characters and create a couple of words, upper, lowercase, capitals, before I commit, because it's a huge commitment. I mean, it really is a huge commitment. And then I start noodling, and eventually I will break that down into components, in other words, pieces that are common throughout the font. And then eventually I will import those and noodle them again, because the tools inside of FontLab are way better than Illustrator. Illustrator, when you compare the two, FontLab is way nicer to work with. But I'm so used to working in Illustrator that I find that's my workflow, and that's just the way it works for me.
I mean, it makes sense. It's easy to pull a sketch in Illustrator too.
Right.
I imagine. So you said it's very committing, right? What is the scale of commitment when you're starting a typeface? Like how many individual characters, how many notes in the song?
Oh boy, that's a lot. I mean, there are some good shortcuts, like the components and the other characters, you know, the accent marks and what have you, that are semi-automated. So you create it once, and then it just spills out on all the other characters. But you just still have to make adjustments, you know.
Right. Yeah. So when you're pulling things, and we're very in the weeds right now. This is a conversation about craft, so I think it makes sense.
Sorry.
No, I love it. So when you're taking things from Illustrator into this, what did you call the font building program?
FontLab.
Okay. Where do you go from there? Like, how do you make sure the typeface is becoming what you wanted it to be in the first place?
Well, sometimes you get to the end and you look at it and you print it out. Some sample. I have a lot of sample copy that I can test for, you know, for kerning and what have you. Quite often you come to the end of the road and they're like, I don't think so. So you start again.
What kind of sample copy do you work with? Is this like the Declaration of Independence? Is it?
Oh no, there's some really cool ones.
Yeah.
I can't recite them to you, but there's some very interesting ones. People get quite creative. You know what a pangram is?
Actually, I don't. What's a pangram?
It's a sentence that incorporates all the letters of the alphabet.
So quick brown fox,
right.
Lazy dog,
yeah,
that one?
Yep. So I've come up with a couple of them. I'm trying to think of one of them is King Buthelezi pays homage to King Harold and Queen Sonja of Norway. But
you're telling me you put all the alphabet in that? Where's the Z?
I'm sorry?
Where's the Z?
It was in there somewhere. I promise. Maybe the homage is the wrong word. There was a Z in there somewhere.
I like it. That's
but
good.
yeah, I wish somebody would. I know there was an app once that had where you could try things out, and they give you the count and show you which letters have been used and which ones haven't been used.
A Pangram builder?
Mm-hmm.
Anybody want to build it?
So it's a lot of fun. There's some really, I think I have a PDF on one of my sites with a collection of them, but if you go to Wikipedia and you put in Pangram, I think you'll be amazed, and you'll find them in different languages as well. It's a lot of fun. There's some really fun ones.
There's an emphasis on fun here. I'm really excited to explore that a little bit. So your work...
Buthelezi, that's where the Z is.
Oh. It's Polish. Your work spans a broad range of industries, and it's work for anyone from massive multinational corporations to individuals and friends who are doing things that you believe in. How do you balance craft and the needs of the person that you're working for or with?
I think a lot of the time working for big corporations or large multinational corporations is glamorized. The reality is that you're probably a very small part in a very big effort. So it's not you know, it's a big deal, but it's not that big of a deal. I personally find it much more satisfying to work with middle-sized companies because you get much more involved. The companies that don't have their own art department, they have a little bit of PR. Those are the kind of companies that I love to work with because you get involved from beginning to end. It's much more satisfying. Yeah, I mean, obviously you have to, I find that I am, what's the word I'm trying to find? I have to give everything to all my clients because that's my responsibility. Obviously,
dedicated is maybe the word. Passionate?
Well, yeah, maybe. But I mean, it's, you know, somebody's entrusted you with their business, and so it's your responsibility to, you know, to do your best, obviously.
Yeah. So you said a little bit about craft being this amalgamation. Sorry, that's not a 9:30 in the morning word. This mashup of being a good human and being inspired and being aware and present, and also all these bits of detail and talent. And it sounds like you're kind of saying that your client is just another piece in that puzzle, in a sense?
Yes, it is, obviously. But I think just coming back to the word craft, one of the things that, one of the descriptions that I have in there is experience. Experience is a very dangerous thing because experience can make you comfortable if you have a lot of experience. And that means when you're comfortable, chances that you're going to innovate are far lower. So I think it's very important to always be aware of that. And I get excited about people that don't have a lot of experience because they often step into things, I have no idea of what's going on, but in the process of doing that, they innovate. So it's a double-edged sword for me.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. It's innovation is accidental more often than not, right? Mm-hmm. So how do you, as someone who has had experience, mm-hmm. keep that edge to you? Because your work isn't expected. It's not redoing the same thing over and over again. I
guess it's curiosity. Just stay curious and break the rules. Breaking the rules is really important because, I mean, you know, obviously within reason, but I think that's when innovation happens.
Great. An intentional pursuit of breaking the rules is important for craft. You heard it here first. Well, what do you think the relationship is between practicing a craft and social responsibility?
Well, I think I can sum it up fairly easily. If you imagine if you're a doctor, you've spent a lot of years honing your craft, learning, gaining knowledge, practicing, what have you. And then one day you're on a plane and you get an announcement that says, "Is there a doctor on board?" That's us.
I like that. I like that. So an analogy would maybe be like a city that needs some help in communicating itself, or?
It can come in a variety of different forms, but the point is, are you going to answer the call, or are you going to look for it?
Right. So how do you look for
and
the
you
call?
you don't necessarily, the doctor doesn't send a bill while he's up there doing an emergency.
Right. No, that makes sense. So, as a designer, how do you listen for the call, though?
Well, for me, I do a number of different things. I counted the other day, I have something like 22 websites that I've built for nonprofits that, you know, free of charge. And I go to Ethiopia every year. I'm on a board of a very small ministry that takes care of some orphan kids. And so I do their website and their collateral material and what have you. And on the eco-friendly side of things, this is probably really stupid because our electricity is very reasonable in this area.
Right. Thank you, TVA.
Yeah, thank you, TVA. I have a solar panel, and I run all my electronics off solar power. It's free, so why not, right?
It's the future, they say.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So, I don't know, I think there's a lot of conversation in the design world about never working for free, like value yourself, and that's so important. You
Right.
should, and most people probably
Should.
undercharge for what they're doing,
Right.
right? So what are your thoughts about that tension?
Yes. I don't think it makes sense for any commercial operation to not charge anything. Obviously, you have to. But there's this thing called groan level. In other words, how much, all you have to do, I usually, this is terrible, but
Good, lay it on us.
when I go to a new client, you can very quickly tell if there's money in the company or not by looking at the car park.
Ooh.
And
That's great.
you can charge if you feel there's obviously some worth here, then charge. But if somebody's clearly struggling, then you just have to accommodate them to some extent. But you have to charge, absolutely.
That's a good answer. Peak the parking lot. Well, so I keep circling back to big brands, and I think it might be helpful actually to lay a little bit of context out. What are some examples of big brands that you've worked with that you've produced tangible work for?
GE was a big one, and I was just thinking along the way here how things have changed. I remember the first time I saw a meatball on a website, thinking that's cool, but nobody's going to understand that. The first time I saw it, and now it's become the norm, the generic, obviously.
The hamburger?
The hamburger, exactly.
Nice.
And did I say meatball?
You did.
That was my point. It's GE. GE's logo is called the meatball.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So where am I going with this? I don't know.
We're talking about some big
Okay,
brands.
so some of the companies that I respect personally is I love Burton snowboards because I think all the examples that I'm thinking of are have superb, very well crafted products, very well made. But I love their branding because they in fact have hundreds of logos. I mean, they have one logo, but they put their name out in hundreds of different ways. And I think that's a gutsy move. I also love the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam's identity and branding. Their branding is very cool. They also have an enormously gutsy thing that they do, which is they have a thing called Rijks Studio. And what they do is you can go onto the website and create your own studio space and literally draw from all the material, all the artwork that's there and create something. They're fine with it. They're okay with it. They want you to be involved. And
That's
so,
amazing.
yeah, and then what they do is they have a competition every year to see how people have applied it, and they pick a couple of winners, and they usually turn those into products that they then sell in the museum store, which is really cool.
That's brilliant, and
Yeah.
yeah, very gutsy. There's this bit of corporate branding that's very, very protective, and both of those examples are very here, take it.
Yeah,
It's democratic almost, right?
Exactly.
Huh.
And then IKEA I love because it's good design for low prices is their motto, but I love their thinking in using, although I'm not a fan of Verdana, the typeface, they use Verdana rather than, they used to use Futura, which I thought was a nicer fit, but Verdana makes complete sense because it's good design at low prices. Verdana is cheap and pervasive. So
That's awesome. I mean, yeah, I miss Futura for sure. How do you feel about other low-price typefaces? Like the ones that come with your system fonts. What are your thoughts on system fonts?
I like Georgia. I think it's pretty cool. Helvetica. But I think nowadays it doesn't really matter too much anymore because we're going to have variable fonts and color fonts. I don't know that they've quite spilled into the web yet, but I'm sure that that's just a matter of time.
Google's doing a few experiments right now.
Yeah.
So actually, and this is a little bit of a rabbit trail, so I'll keep it a little short.
Rabbit trail's good.
Yeah, we like rabbits. You can quote me on that too. So as a fontographer, how do variable fonts change what you're doing?
Well, I think if you go back, I remember, gosh, this is in the 90s. There was a program called
.exe.
Yeah, Font Chameleon, and it was awesome because it was a precursor of multiple master fonts. So basically, what they did was they used, it was like all the regular fonts. They pulled in all their data, and you could literally, vary the font and blend them and do all kinds of crazy stuff with it. And then multiple master fonts came out, which was great, except that it became a huge mess in terms of all the variables become real fonts. And so people ended up with massive amounts of font variations.
What's a good example of a multiple master font?
Myriad is probably a good one.
Okay, so
Yeah.
like the Adobe Cut, are you talking about different type foundries having different?
Right, so basically you'd get Myriad Light and then Myriad Black, and then you get the condensed versions and you get the italic versions, and you can do any variation in between of that to be exactly what you want. But you have to output it. And I think that's why it failed. And so variable fonts is really, as a result of that idea, that it was resuscitated, but it is now a proper, legitimate version that doesn't, clutter up, all your resources.
Right.
So.
Right. It's the future, finally.
Right.
So actually, I'm realizing I just took a deep dive into being a designery nerd. What's a good definition of a variable font?
I don't know. I mean, I don't understand what you mean. Are you saying
how does it define it to someone who is only aware of fonts in a broad sense?
Well, it's as I said before, it's like like multiple master in the sense that you can pick a weight between light and regular. If light is too light and regular is too bold, you can go right in between wherever you want and use that as your norm.
Gotcha. So it's a Goldilocks.
Right.
Goldilocks type. Great. Well, what's the most unexpected or surprising project that you've been a part of? What's one of your out of left field projects? And can you tell us a story about it?
And they always come out of left field. I had a friend who thought that I was super creative, and he met a literary agent who he introduced me to, and he said, this guy and his family can create books for you. I'm like, we've never done books. Are you crazy? So anyway, he persuaded us to come up with a concept, and my family and I went to Vermont for a weekend, and we powwowed, and we decided we'd give it a shot. My wife had done some writing, and she comes from a family of storytellers, which is also a dying art, I believe. But anyway, long story short, we came up with a concept for a series of books called Seedling and Sprout, and for two different age groups, the Seedling series and the Sprout series. And it was a series of 8 books, and they took it. It was Random House, And
Whoa.
it was a huge deal. It was a 2-year project.
Good
And
grief.
the entire family was involved. My daughter did one range of the books, and my son did the other side. My wife did the writing, and I was the project manager, I guess.
They gave you the thankless job? Oh,
Yeah.
man. So you have a creative family.
Mhm.
You have a family that practices craft. How have you kind of made that space?
It's difficult because obviously if you're working hard, you don't have a lot of time with your family that much. But I try to make it fun. I think they didn't have much of a choice, you know, with all the stuff going on in the house. We always had crazy stuff going on, and so fortunately, I suppose there was a little bit of genetics involved.
That's fair. That's fair. You pass it down. Well, I have a bonus round question as we're wrapping up our time a little bit. So, it's a few years since its launch. I hear rumblings all the time. People refer to you as the godfather of Chatype, which I don't think they mean as ominously as they could. But a few years since its launch, it's all over the city. It's the signage for the library. How do you feel about its usage? How do you feel about its adoption? Are there things that you like? Are there things that you dislike? And really, what's your dream for its future, for its next 2 years?
Well, first of all, I have to correct you. It was a team effort. Jeremy Dooley was the other type designer, and DJ Trishler and Jonathan Mansfield made it happen. Those two guys were incredible. And of course, Kickstarter and you know, all the people that supported us. I'm still in awe of all the people. I thought it was nuts to go to Kickstarter and actually say that we want to do this thing and ask people to support us, because it's only for Chattanooga. Nobody else can use it. One of the misuses was, I think it was a Swedish building company that downloaded the font and they're using it as their corporate typeface. Yeah.
Wonder how they answer the what typeface is that question.
Yeah, I don't know. But that was the other thing that we did a little differently that I've never seen again before and after. Maybe I just not looking around properly, but we did our end user license as a video rather than, you know, printing out legalese.
I'm realizing that might be the first end user license I've ever made it to the end of.
Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, I mean, I think the misuses, there are quite a few examples of those that I'm not going to mention. But I'd rather that people use it than not, personally. I think it's part of the fabric of the city. I'd love to see it being used. That was the intention. And yeah, so I think in terms of the future, we created a book that was part of the giveaway that we had, and we had a limited edition of those books. I think we should bring those back and make them a bit more freely available, make people more aware of it.
Can I get on that list? I want one pretty
Sure.
badly. I'm not the only one, am I? All right, good. So as far as usage goes, though, like, is there a dream place you want to see it?
Gosh, I don't know. I think I'm really pleased about the library is like Chatype. I mean, the whole place is riddled with Chatype. I think it's really cool, and it's a nice big sign outside. I don't know. I mean, it's only fair that, well, first of all, nobody can use it as a logo. Nobody's supposed to use it as a logo. So I'd like to see it around in more places than they are right now. But, you know, at the same time, you don't want to clutter the place with too much of it. So, but I think it's really put Chattanooga on the map, I'd like to think. It is different in that I don't know that anybody realizes it's the only city in the US that has its own official typeface, and it's the only city in the world that has its own typeface that people can use, that the citizens can use. It's not, because usually it's commissioned by the city government and then works its way into the government itself and never goes beyond that.
Here it's democratic and it's
exactly
for everyone.
That was the whole idea. And then the city came to us afterwards, I think a year later, and said we'd like to issue a proclamation that it's Chattanooga's official typeface. So
that's amazing.
Yeah.
I love the idea of associating design work with a proclamation.
Yeah.
Typography with a proclamation. Well, thank you for spending this time with us today. Guys, give it up for Robbie. Thank you for everything you've done for design in the city. It could too easily be diminished. We're grateful to have you here. Thanks for your time.
I love it here. People are wonderful.
How long have you been in Chattanooga, by the way?
About 7 years,
Okay.
I think, yeah.
Any regrets?
Yes.
Well, we have a couple of minutes for Q&A if you're all right with it.
Sure.
If you guys have any questions for Robbie, I will run the mic to you in the crowd.
Hi, Robbie.
Hi.
As far as the Chatype goes, I assume as a fontographer, you normally work alone. Can you talk to us about the process of collaborating on a font
For Chatype?
for Chatype?
Oh yes, that was very interesting because we both came from very different angles. Jeremy focused more on the traditional railway sort of past of Chattanooga and the Cherokee influence of the Cherokee syllabary, which both of us fell in love with. We had a conversation with a historian that was very revealing as well. And so we kind of got wrapped up into that whole historical side of things and the sort of more country type feel of Chatype. And we both worked independently and sort of got together, and I had crazy ideas. I looked at the proportions of the Walker Bridge and realized that it conformed to the golden ratio. And at a certain angle, I was looking at Lookout Mountain, and I'm like, that also conforms to the golden ratio at this, at this particular vantage point. And if you look at a cross section of a railway line, the shape of the line itself also conforms to the golden proportion. So I utilized those bits and pieces in the font itself. And at some point, we both realized that Chattanooga is undergoing a huge transformation with all the technology going on and what have you. And so it's not fair to lean too far back, but rather to look forward a little bit. And so what we did was, mine was a lot more sort of futuristic looking, if you like. And so what we did was, what Jeremy did was he merged the two. You can blend the two. And it was a happy union, at least so he tells me. I don't know if he cheated or not, but it looked good. And so we both decided, for the sake of moving on, this is probably the best direction to move forward with. And so those same proportions still exist in Chatype. Yeah, it was awkward in the beginning because, we each had our own ideas, even though we had the same points of reference, but it all worked out.
I can say that again. Anyone else? You still have a question? Perfect.
Hey, Robbie. You talked about the commitment of designing a font but then getting to the end of it and being like, scrap that. Can you just talk about your creative process of the demons you battle maybe when you have to scrap a project and start over? How you fight through? Because I think everyone who's creative at one point feels like, why am I doing this? I can't do this. So can you talk about that process a little bit?
I'm not sure if I completely understood you, but I think, are you talking about how do you deal with the disappointment of the failure of this thing? You know, I've realized over time that time is a very precious thing. It's like when when you get a brief for a design, your brain starts working right away. Even though you haven't officially started on a project, your brain starts ticking over. And over time, something develops. By the time you start putting pen to paper, your brain has already processed a bunch of things, and you can move on a little easier. As far as the project that I rejected or the design that I rejected, I find if I leave it, set it aside, sometimes it can be a year later, I look back and think, what was I thinking? This is stupid. It really doesn't look good, but there's something here that I can work with. And then I find perhaps that I can modify something a little bit, and then it takes off and it works. So I don't know if that helps you, but yeah, it's just letting it simmer sometimes is very useful. But I find that if I saturate myself with as much as I can gather around a certain idea, and then start the creative process, it usually works out pretty well.
That's a great answer. Anyone else? All right.
Done.
Good people, give it up for Robbie de Villers.
Okay.